Many people assume that ignoring a warning always looks dramatic. They imagine open rejection, loud disagreement, or visible rebellion. But most warnings are ignored quietly, gradually, through habit, distraction, and delay. When Jesus gave warnings, he often described behaviors that look normal on the surface, patterns that blend into daily life. That is what makes them dangerous. You can live inside them without noticing them. This message invites you to examine not what you claim to believe, but how you actually behave. Jesus did not spend most of his time warning criminals and obvious outsiders. He often warned listeners who considered themselves faithful, people who attended, listened, agreed, and still drifted. That detail matters. It means familiarity with spiritual language does not guarantee spiritual alignment. You can recognize truth and still resist it in practice. One of his repeated warnings focused on hearing without action. He described people who listen carefully, nod in agreement, feel emotionally moved, and then change nothing. He compared that life to construction on unstable ground. From a distance, the house looks complete. The walls stand. The roof holds. Nothing seems missing. The weakness hides below the surface. Pressure reveals it later. The warning targets passive agreement. Agreement feels like progress, but without action, it produces no structure. Think about how often you consume meaningful content, feel conviction for a moment, and then return to routine unchanged. That gap between insight and action widens over time. Each time it widens, responsiveness weakens. The next warning feels softer. The next conviction fades faster. Sensitivity drops through repetition. Jesus also warned about external religion paired with internal neglect. Visible devotion can coexist with hidden disorder. Public prayer with private dishonesty. Spoken kindness with concealed resentment. He challenged behavior that seeks recognition more than transformation. When approval becomes the reward, growth stops at appearance level. Motivation reveals direction. Two people can perform the same action for opposite reasons. One to serve, one to be seen serving. From the outside they match. Inside they diverge. Jesus consistently pulled attention back to motive. Why you act matters as much as what you do. Another warning addressed spiritual delay. The promise to change later feels harmless. Later sounds responsible, thoughtful, planned, but later often becomes never. Jesus told stories where people postponed response until opportunity closed, not because they rejected the invitation, but because they ranked it lower than other priorities. Delay rarely announces itself as danger. It presents itself as scheduling. That is why it works. Urgency fades when consequences feel distant. The heart adapts to postponement. Intent without movement slowly turns into resistance without admission. He also warned about distraction through daily pressure and material pursuit. Work, money, stability, reputation, and planning can fill attention completely. None of these are condemned by themselves. The warning appears when they consume all margin, when inner life receives leftovers only, when reflection disappears, when silence feels uncomfortable. A crowded inner life cannot hear subtle correction. Noise blocks signal, constant input blocks examination. Jesus described people weighed down internally, not attacked externally. Burdened attention leads to dulled awareness. There is also the warning about selective obedience, accepting teachings that match preference while ignoring teachings that confront behavior. This creates a customized belief system shaped by comfort. Correction gets filtered out. Challenge gets postponed. Only affirmation remains. Growth requires friction. Remove friction, and growth stops. Jesus warned often about unforgiveness because it hides behind justification. The offended person feels correct, and often is correct about the offense. But holding the offense becomes a separate choice. Resentment reshapes perception. It turns memory into fuel. It keeps the wound active. The warning here is internal damage that spreads quietly. He warned about moral sleep, a state where conscience signals grow faint, not because truth changed, but because response stopped. Repeated override reduces sensitivity. What once felt wrong now feels tolerable. What felt serious now feels small. This drift happens through repetition, not decision. Another warning addressed false confidence, assuming spiritual safety based on association, background, or knowledge. Jesus told stories where people expected approval because of proximity, not practice. They knew the language but not the lifestyle. Expectation replaced preparation. Preparation appears often in his warnings. Stay ready, stay watchful, stay active in response. Readiness is not anxiety, it is alignment maintained daily. Hypocrisy received some of his strongest warnings, not because failure is worst, but because pretending blocks repair. Honest failure invites change. Pretended success prevents it. When image control replaces truth-telling, healing cannot start. He also warned about influence and responsibility. Your behavior teaches others even when you do not speak. Quiet example carries weight. Small compromises multiply when copied. Influence expands consequence beyond intention. There is a warning about divided loyalty, trying to hold opposing priorities equally. When values conflict, choices expose the real leader. Split loyalty produces unstable decisions. Direction shifts with pressure. Jesus presented clarity of loyalty as protection. He warned about pride in subtle form, not loud boasting, but quiet independence from correction, the belief that you already see clearly enough. Pride resists examination. It rejects questions that expose weakness. Teachability disappears first, then growth. Another warning focused on truth resistance. Some listeners hear correction and immediately defend, redirect, or minimize. Defense feels like strength, but blocks adjustment. The warning invites listening before answering. Jesus also warned that consequences operate even when unseen. Seeds grow underground before appearing above ground. Character forms in hidden choices before public moments reveal it. Direction decides outcome long before outcome arrives. He warned about wide paths that feel easy and popular. Ease attracts crowds. Difficulty filters commitment. Popular approval does not confirm accuracy. Many move together in the wrong direction comfortably. Return this to personal reflection, not what others do, not what groups do, what you repeat, what you delay, what you defend, what you ignore. Patterns reveal alignment more clearly than intentions. Warnings exist to interrupt drift. They function like course correction signals. Small adjustments early prevent major loss later. Ignored signals do not disappear. They repeat with greater cost. Jesus paired every warning with invitation. Change direction. Act on what you hear. Forgive quickly. Seek integrity privately. Stay alert internally. Choose truth when it costs comfort. Practice, not just agree. Examination is not meant to produce fear. It produces clarity. Clarity supports change. Change restores direction. Take a quiet moment now and review your recent behavior patterns. Not your stated values, your lived ones. Where do your actions repeat against what you know is right? Where have you delayed what you already understand? Where have you protected comfort over truth? A warning heard and applied becomes protection. A warning ignored becomes regret. The difference forms in response, not exposure. In the next exploration, we will take one extended warning teaching from Jesus and walk through it slowly, sentence by sentence, so you can see how warning, invitation, and decision connect in one continuous message. Let's go deeper into how Jesus builds a warning message, because his warnings follow a pattern. First, he describes a familiar situation, something drawn from daily life, work, family, money, reputation, planning, celebration. Nothing abstract, nothing distant. Then he introduces a small shift, a neglected detail, a delayed response, a hidden motive. That small shift becomes the turning point. The outcome changes because of what looked minor at first. This teaching method forces self-recognition. Listeners see their routine inside the story. That is intentional. A warning only works when the listener can locate themselves inside it. Consider how often Jesus warned about self-deception. Not deception by others first, but deception within. The human ability to justify behavior is strong. You can rename compromise as wisdom. You can rename fear as caution. You can rename disobedience as timing. Language can protect habits you do not want to surrender. Self-deception rarely feels dishonest. It feels reasonable. That is why it survived so long. Jesus challenged reasoning patterns, not only behavior patterns. He questioned the inner narrative people used to excuse themselves. He also warned about divided inner priorities, trying to keep spiritual commitment while protecting a conflicting habit. Instead of choosing, people negotiate internally. They reduce standards slightly. They adjust definitions. Over time, the adjusted version replaces the original. The person still uses the same words, but with altered meaning. Another repeated warning addressed attention drift, not rebellion. Drift, a slow movement off course caused by neglect, not decision. Boats drift when no one corrects direction. Lives drift the same way. No daily correction, no regular reflection, no intentional recalibration. Drift feels smooth. That is the danger. No alarm, no friction, only distance increasing quietly. Jesus also warned about emotional reaction replacing rooted conviction. Quick enthusiasm appears fast and fades fast. He described listeners who receive truth with joy but develop no depth. When pressure arrives, commitment collapses. Emotion started the journey. Only conviction sustains it. Depth forms through repetition and practice, not inspiration alone. Warning messages often point to endurance, not intensity. There is also the warning about comparison, measuring yourself only against others instead of against truth. Comparison creates false comfort. You can always find someone worse and feel safe. Jesus redirected measurement back to standard, not neighbor. Relative goodness hides absolute need for change. He warned about harsh judgment toward others, paired with leniency toward self. Strict evaluation outward, gentle excuses inward. This imbalance blocks humility. Humility opens correction. Without humility, warnings feel offensive instead of protective. Another pattern appears in warnings about speech. Words reveal inner condition. Casual dishonesty, exaggeration, destructive talk, and empty promises shape character. Speech habits train thought habits. Jesus treated words as indicators, not decorations. He also warned about neglecting small obedience while chasing large recognition, wanting visible impact without private discipline. Large visible acts grow from small invisible consistency. Skip the small, and the large never stabilizes. There are warnings connected to readiness under uncertainty. Not knowing timing should increase preparation, not decrease it. Yet many reduce preparation when timing feels unknown. Uncertainty becomes an excuse instead of a motivator. Jesus reversed that logic. He warned about attachment to control, the need to control outcomes, perception, and timing. Control feels like safety, but it can replace trust and obedience. When control leads, truth gets filtered through risk avoidance. Another warning focused on invitation fatigue, hearing many calls to change until the calls lose urgency. Repetition without response breeds numbness. Familiar warnings stop sounding like warnings. They sound like background noise. That is a dangerous stage. He warned about valuing tradition over truth when the two conflict. Tradition provides structure, truth provides direction. Structure without direction produces rigid error. Jesus confronted leaders who defended systems while neglecting purpose. There are also warnings about inner honesty during worship and prayer, saying words not matched by intent, participation without engagement, ritual without attention. The act continues while the heart disconnects. Over time, the disconnect feels normal. Jesus warned that inner state matters more than external sequence. Clean outside appearance cannot repair inner disorder. Inner repair eventually reshapes outer behavior. The direction works from inside outward. He warned about fear of human opinion overriding obedience. When approval becomes necessary, truth becomes negotiable. Courage drops when reputation risk rises. This warning appears wherever social pressure grows. He also warned that gain can become loss when priorities invert. Gaining status, wealth, or recognition while losing integrity, purpose, and alignment produces net loss. Outcome must be measured fully, not partially. Another warning addressed resentment toward correction itself, rejecting the message because it feels uncomfortable. Discomfort can signal threat, but it can also signal needed change. Reflex rejection blocks examination. He warned about forgetting past rescue and provision. Memory loss of past help reduces present trust. Gratitude supports stability. Forgetfulness supports anxiety and complaint. Recalling past faithfulness strengthens present obedience. There are warnings about spiritual passivity, waiting to feel ready before acting right. Readiness often follows obedience, not the reverse. Action can lead emotion. Delay waiting for feeling leads stagnation. Jesus also warned that internal treasure shapes perception. What you value most controls attention and interpretation. Change the treasure and perception changes with it. This is diagnostic, not poetic. Step back and observe the pattern across all these warnings. They target habits more than moments, direction more than incidents, formation more than events. That means your daily repeated choices carry more weight than your rare dramatic ones. This brings the message into your schedule, your reactions, your private decisions, your repeated delays, your defended habits. Not abstract spirituality, practical alignment. Warnings are early signals of mercy. They arrive before collapse. They invite correction, while change still costs less. Ignoring them increases eventual cost, not because punishment is impulsive, but because consequences are consistent. Right now, instead of asking whether you agree with these warnings, ask where they intersect your routine. Agreement informs the mind. Identification informs change. Choose one pattern you recognized. Name it clearly. Remove vague language. State it plainly. Then define one behavior shift that moves opposite to it. Small, repeatable, specific. That is how warnings convert into growth.